We now, with Caravaggio, and we now go again, it's in Rome, and it's just as one enters through the walls, through northern walls, and you're in the Piazza del Popolo, and on your left there is the church of Santa Maria del Popolo, and in that church there are two more Caravaggios, really significant, very significant Caravaggios, and then in the middle is Annibale Carracci, of whom we'll also talk. He's also part of this, the whole Baroque revival. It's called the Chapel of the Annunciation, after the painting of Annibale. But on both sides, Caravaggio represented one, the Crucifixion of St Peter, and on the other, the Seeing of Light by St Paul. So here we go to the Crucifixion of St Peter, and we pretty much know already what to look for in a Caravaggio painting. Well, first of all, it's, as I said, just subdued in darkness. It's sunk into darkness. An extremely powerful diagonal. Now, St. Peter was crucified according to legend, and he was just, according to legend, both he and St. Paul were executed under Nero, but while St. Paul was a Roman citizen, in fact, even though he was a diaspora Jew, but he was at the same time a Roman citizen. So Roman citizens were never crucified. They were beheaded. That was his martyrdom. And but St. Peter was not. St. Peter was a Jew from Jerusalem, and he was not a Roman citizen, and therefore under the Nero persecutions of the Christians, he was crucified. But he refused to be crucified as his Lord was crucified, and demanded to be crucified upside down. And as a result, every time we see a crucifixion of St. Peter, it is always upside down. And as a result, the Vatican cross actually has several horizontal planks. One for the cross itself up above, and one here for St. Peter, because he was crucified upside down. And so what Caravaggio does, well, for one thing, what do we immediately see? It's not even St. Peter. What we see is the behind of this man, that he's dressed in these yellow pants, and because St. Peter clearly is quite heavy, and getting the whole thing up is really difficult. I mean, this is what this man does. He actually bends and offers his back to lift the cross up. And that's the first thing we see. We see this incredibly filthy foot. Another filthy foot. His some bag, and then his behind. I mean, that's what. And don't forget that the painting is hung rather high, so our eyesight is on the level with this man's bottom. That's the first thing. Then this man we barely see, and then with St. Peter here, when we finally get to St. Peter, what we see is his face, and of course his face is very intense. I mean, after all, our attention is almost more attracted by his feet that are spewing blood, and this enormous nail that's driven through his hand. Even though it seems that in crucifixion, I know we're all very used to stigmata, which is the wounds of crucifixion, but actually they could not be crucified. They could not drive the nails through the hand, because the hand wouldn't be able to sustain it. They drove the nails through the wrists, because there's a lot more bone here, and that was more sustainable than through the hand. The hand would just be torn. And but Caravaggio doesn't avoid any of it. I mean, he wants realism. He wants it in our faces. He wants what he really just managed to do is combine incredible realism and yet at the same time, profound religious conviction of the truth. And he combined it together, just as he convinced he convinced us that the young Bacchus is sitting in front of us and that we are sharing the table with him. He is convincing us, particularly because these figures are so real, that this must have happened. And now it's happening right in front of our eyes. So it's almost as if the air is bewitched with reality, but at the same time with dramatic tangibility. It's sort of it's as if the supernatural here is conveyed in very realistic terms. And in fact, I mean, crucifixion is not even supernatural. Crucifixion was very realistic and was practiced, of course, by the Romans. And not only the Romans, many other civilizations. And here we come to another tremendous canvas by Caravaggio, also from Santa Maria del Popolo. And the first one was the St. Peter, and this one is the conversion of St. Paul. Now, St. Paul was a Jew from diaspora, in other words, not from Palestine, but from other places where many Jews lived, and he was born in Tarsus, and which is in sort of southeastern Turkey today, on the Mediterranean Sea. And at first he was a Pharisee Jew, and he worked for the temple. And the temple was unhappy with this new rabbi, Jesus, as he called himself, because Jesus, of course, was Jewish as well. And but the temple was unhappy with his teachings, and well, according to legend, the temple decided to go after these new adherents to the new rabbi, and St. Paul was one of the people searching them out, working for the temple, and bringing them back to the temple for examination, because I mean they were still presumably obedient Jews, even though they now entertain sort of a slightly different direction. But Jesus himself never dreamt of establishing a new religion. He was very much a Jew, and he just wanted to introduce certain ramifications into the religion. So St. Paul was going after these people. So the story goes that one day when he took off from the Damascus gate in Jerusalem towards Damascus in the north, in the middle of the road or so, he had a vision, something happened to him, he falls off the horse, and when he comes to, he is converted. He sees celestial light, and by the time he gets to Damascus, in fact, he now has seen the light, literally. Needless to say, there are all sorts of theories that St. Paul, who did exist, in fact, the only witness literary sources we have in the New Testament are, the first ones are the letters of St. Paul. He did exist, he did write to all the cities, and he was extremely instrumental, in fact, in making Christianity a non-Jewish religion. In fact, we really kind of inherited Pauline Christianity rather than Jesus' Christianity, which was preached after Jesus' crucifixion by his brother James. But then the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70, and so the Jews really lost their roots right there, and the whole Jewish population became exiled shortly thereafter. So, and then James also died, but Paul was a busybody, and he was I mean, the Romans built roads throughout the empire. They made it very easy for him, and everybody spoke, if not Latin, if not Greek, then Latin. And Paul, of course, spoke Greek because he was born in the Greek part of the Roman Empire, and everybody spoke Greek. So he was his mission was made very, very easy by the roads, and of course by universal language. So, but back to the to Caravaggio's painting. As before, it is completely drowned in darkness. And what do we really see when we look at that painting? The first thing we see this enormous horse. We don't really, I mean, Paul is right there. We don't see him immediately. We see this enormous horse, and he is, and he's certainly not an aristocratic horse. He's a working horse. He is a heavy horse. He is being driven from city to city, and he's tired. He really is tired. He's probably very, very happy that this guy fell off his back at this point. And so there's the horse and the attendant. And the attendant really seems to be more worried about the horse. He pets
He does.
I mean, look, he's looking at the horse. I mean, meanwhile, this guy, is he an epileptic? Possibly. Just Caravaggio translates everything into reality. We're going down the road. It is night. There are no lights. The guy falls off his horse and he's shaking. He probably has an epilepsy attack. But his not his companion, his servant has lived with this horse. He takes care of that horse. He loves the horse. The horse probably loves him. The two of them are related. I mean, neither of them is an aristocrat. And the horse almost and the servant too. They both have this tired, exhausted expressions. And do they really care that this guy is fallen down and why he's falling down? Are they really amazed at the miracle? They don't think it's a miracle. It's just, I mean, their business now is to pick him up, throw him over the horse again, and get him to Damascus and get him some help. And I mean, that's what Caravaggio is painting, in fact. Meanwhile, is a completely different entity. There lies our St. Paul with his arms extended, and he is in a brilliant foreshortening. I mean, Caravaggio was a phenomenal draftsman. So he's brilliantly foreshortened, he's screaming, he's yelling. Nobody really knows what it is that he wants. And it's unclear where the light comes from either. I mean, the light clearly comes from somewhere up above. And his favorite tenebrism, the deeply dark background with a very white spot on the horse, and here he is. So the light falls on him, but that's not where we really look. We kind of feel sorry about the horse. We feel sorry about the companion. I mean, their life is hard enough without this guy now getting sick, and screaming some incomprehensible nonsense, essentially, which is what it is to them. So really an incredible painting in this respect. And I mean, Caravaggio saw everything from a different angle. Everything and anything. And I mean, the entire painting is taken up by the horse. There is nothing left over. It's almost the horse is pushing out the frame of the painting. He's careful, however. Look, he's very gingerly picking up his front right leg, sort of not to hit the guy beneath him. Really very, I mean, not just realistic, but also incredibly moving. But you can imagine that even though it's clear that Caravaggio is sympathizing with this man, with the servant. But as I said before, the simple folk who went to churches did not appreciate these paintings because, as I said, they didn't want to see themselves. They want to see glory, they want to see gold, they want to see something extraordinary, they want to see a miracle. There's no miracle in a guy falling off the horse. So thus Caravaggio. Still another one by him, and a biblical source. I mean, it comes from the Bible, of course. And here is Christ now. He's been resurrected. He's come back to earth, and he meets a group of men, among whom he recognizes one of his disciples, and his name is Thomas, known to us as Saint Thomas. And he tells them, and they ask him who he is, and he says, "Well, I'm your teacher, and I've been resurrected." And lo and behold, Thomas doesn't believe him, which is why in the future, anytime there's scientists who doubt, sort of take for their patron saint Saint Thomas. He became the saint of doubters. He became the saint of scientists, the saint of the minds that inquire, as opposed to the minds that just take everything on faith. So here's St. Thomas, and then he says it to him, "Prove it to me." So at which point Christ moves his climate, and St. Thomas literally sticks a finger into it.
This is an interesting point, because in the Bible it is never specified whether or not Thomas touches the wound.
Oh, and in the Renaissance, whenever this was portrayed, he never touches the wound.
Because it's left ambiguous. It's not that
Right.
he doesn't touch it. It's not that it's not that it doesn't say that he saw the wound and it confirmed the truth to him. It doesn't say that he touched the wound and it confirmed the truth to him. It simply says that Jesus exposed the wound to him. It does not say either way. So it's interesting that Caravaggio chose not just that he touched the wound, but he stuck his whole digit in there.
Exactly. I mean, look, this is so realistic. And the face on him with the same wrinkles as we saw in the original Saint Matthew. He is looking so intently, or he is looking so intensely into, and he sticks his finger, my God, he sticks it down to the second knuckle. Yeah, and his face expresses surprise, disbelief, at the same time understanding. Everything is there. And then his companions also are looking, and they're all men of the people, everybody. They're all wearing these simple clothes, very common clothes. And meanwhile, Christ's face is very patient and very accepting and very willing to supply the proof. There is no indignation, there is none of that. And the scene, the background is not as dark as in some of Caravaggio's paintings, but it is still somber. And the light seems to come from the left, so that the light, of course, lights up Christ and Thomas's face. So the two most important things here are Christ and his wound, and of course Thomas's face. The painting is it's in Sanssouci in Germany, Potsdam. And here's still another Caravaggio. I'm really taking you through a great deal of Caravaggios, but he's so important, and it's really important to remember him and to see these paintings. As always, with this painting too, with this theme rather, the beheading of Saint John the Baptist, he again takes a completely different point of view. Now, we're going back to the 15th century, just for a bit, to show you how it was usually presented. The story is there's John the Baptist, and who roams the hills of Judea and baptizes people in the River Jordan. And then there's Herod's son, who was also called Herod. He marries, I think, his cousin, whose name is Herodia. Now, according to the law, that was an illegal marriage. You cannot marry a cousin. And St. John the Baptist therefore condemns the marriage. So as a result, Herodia, the wife of Herod, hated him, and she wanted him dead. But Herod was unwilling, because John the Baptist was very popular, and Herod's own reputation was not was not superb, and I mean he didn't want to do it. But nevertheless, I mean they did arrest him, and they brought him to their dwelling. And Herodia was adamant. She wanted him dead. At which point she asked her daughter, and her daughter was the beautiful Salome, or Salome, sometimes she's pronounced. She asked her to dance, and Salome apparently was an extraordinary, remarkable dancer. Well, we're going back now, back to the 15th century, just so I can show you how this scene was usually portrayed. And there is Herod's, there's the Feast of Herod. It's portrayed either as a Feast of Herod, or a dance of Salome, or the execution, the beheading of John the Baptist. So here's a typical scene. This is an Italian, Renaissance Italian interior. They're sitting in this lovely, lovely terrace, and entertainment happens in the middle there, and it's a narrative painting. So here is Herod and Herodia together, and Salome is dancing, and she danced so beautifully that, according to legend again, Herod just couldn't contain himself, and he essentially said, you can have anything you want. And the next thing that Salome wants is the head of John the Baptist. And even though Herod had broken his word many, many times, he feels, for some reason in this case, obliged to keep his word. And he therefore orders for John the Baptist to be executed. And what we see now, narration begins. We see the same people in different places. This is Salome dancing. This also is Salome right there. And I don't know if you can see it, but here is the head of John the Baptist. And Salome is holding a large dish, so that the head could be deposited on the dish. And then this is also Salome right there, and this too is Herodia. So now she takes the dish with the head of John the Baptist and brings it to Herodia. Herodia, there's not a bit of a movement on her face. It's completely, you can't even read the face, but ultimately we know that she's very happy. She finally got her wish. And this is how it usually portrayed. Very often it's portrayed by just Salome presenting a dish with the decapitated head of John the Baptist to both Herodia and Herod. This is how Donatello portrayed it earlier in the 15th century. But this is how the scene is usually portrayed. It's always the Feast of Herod, and it's always the head is already severed, and it is brought before Herod and Herodia, or just Herodia alone. Well, can Caravaggio do as everybody else does? Of course not. That's just not even possible. So what he does, he goes on the other side. He's not interested in the Feast of Herod. What he's interested is in the decapitation itself. And so what you see, this is prison, and Caravaggio and John the Baptist is in fact being executed as we speak. There's a bit of blood from his head, as we saw before with Holofernes, as we saw before with Medusa. I mean, basically you can link this theme to those as well. But the greatest patch of red color is this piece of cloth that is bright, bright red, that is blood red, and that's how the amount of blood is portrayed. And also this is how the tragedy of the event and the hugeness of the event is portrayed as well. Otherwise, we see the usual group of people of low birth, and here is a servant who is holding the tray.
Is that not Salome herself holding the tray?
You think it's Salome? Maybe it is Salome herself.
No, I was just wondering.
She's not dressed as a princess.
Oh, I was just wondering that if it was Herod, his wife, and Salome.
don't think so.
Because
No, they're not dressed as...
because he looks very, I don't know, he has a
I know,
stance.
I don't think so. I think these are executioners.
I see. Okay, that's
Yeah.
just I just had a thought. Okay.
Yeah, I think these are and Salome will receive, but maybe. Well, she's not. I mean, they're all dressed. They're not dressed in wealthy clothes.
No, that was just my.
I mean, possible.
That was just
They're
my
right.
immediate
He didn't.
thought.
He didn't have time to write his notes, unfortunately.
Oh.
I know. And so this is the painting again is divided into two parts. There's the lighter part on the side, and the darker part against which the scene takes place. In the lighter part, however, there's a darker window, and there too you have a spotlight lighting onto other prisoners who are really curious what is going on. And you can imagine the feeling that, well, it may happen to us as well. And here they are. And against the dark background, a very kind of dark Roman background, the execution takes place. So, and one of the women, in fact, expresses sorrow and it's a bit of horror right here. Whereas the man is just directing the operations. He is showing where to place the head. So you see here the servant woman, and then another woman who is, who in fact expresses sorrow, and then the director of operations and the executioner himself. And he, interestingly, he has a knife in the back, but he already cut his head off, unless they I mean, there are all these little details. There's a sword here. The sword doesn't have blood on it, but clearly the execution at least began to take place because there's blood spilling out. But why is he pulling a knife out of its sheath? Is it that, as often happened with executions, one cut wasn't enough, and I mean, additional cutting is necessary?
Could he be putting it back into his sheath? I mean, could the head be fully severed and now he's putting it back and he's about to lift the head from the body? That's why there's blood?
There's no blood on the knife at all.
Well, I mean,
that's possible.
You don't see it.
Yeah,
it's,
that's true.
Possible. It could be that it's just been done and now he's about to lift the severed head off the ground.
Yeah, also possible. But and what's interesting also, because there's the light falls on these two prisoners, there's a tiny bit of light also falls on the toes of St. John the Baptist. I mean, it's interesting how he observed. He knew that he can't just portray light here and not there. The light falls on everything. So the sense of realism is just, I mean, he eliminates either physical or aesthetic distance between us and what he portrays. It all becomes one. This painting actually lives in the Cathedral of St. John in Malta, which I'm about to show you. And then here's the continuation. Maybe this is the servant and maybe this is Salome. They're the same people, and here's the old woman and the man and the woman. And here's the head of John the Baptist, which again belongs to that same category of as Holofernes, as the head of Medusa, and now everything is dark again. And in fact, what we see are 4 heads, except that the 3 heads are still attached to their bodies, and the 4th isn't. But the circle that is created is extremely dramatic. And the woman looks at the head, the old woman, the man looks at the head, and the servant, it's almost as if, I mean, she's ready to take the tray now into the dining hall to show that the deed is done. And now we're going to Malta. Malta is sort of due south. It's a little island south of Italy. And it's a very small island with an extremely rich history. And it is still home to the Knights of St. John, the Maltese cross. There's a cathedral, the Cathedral of St. John, and it was built by the Knights of Malta. It is in Valletta. Valletta is the capital of Malta. And It's a spectacular interior. Interestingly, for instance, in the Sistine Chapel, it's small, the Sistine Chapel, but every image in itself is spectacular. We know who it's done for. We know its history. In the Cathedral of St. John, what you take in really is the cumulative impression. It is so incredible. The entire ceiling is painted, and it's painted directly on. It's not fresco. It's actually painted directly on the masonry, and it has survived quite well. The floor, it's all intarsia marble. In other words, it's like tile, but the images are made by inserting pieces of marble in to make an impression of a picture, which is just phenomenal. And then every inch of the walls is decorated with one method of decoration or another. And then there are, I think, 12 chapels, and each chapel belongs to a different country, which who are members of the Maltese Cross, of the Knights of St. John. And as I said, when we first started talking about Caravaggio, he killed a man in Rome, so he had to escape from Rome. And he went to Naples, and then after Naples, then he went to Malta. And in Malta, the knights were so taken by him, he was actually made a knight of the order, but that didn't last long. As I said, again later he was quarreling with someone, and again he was imprisoned, and again he was escaping, and so his knighthood was revoked. But while he was there, he continued to paint. Here you can see. This is the intarsia marble right there, and there's our skeleton, and here you see it here, and then this is how the walls are decorated, and this is a Maltese cross right there. It's really an extraordinary place, just amazing. While on the outside, it almost looks fortress-like. You would never. It's like the caves of Ali Baba. You never guess when you walk through this very almost forbidding exterior. You never guess what treasure is waiting for you on the inside. And Caravaggio had many followers. As I said, it was just impossible not to be influenced by Caravaggio. After the 17th century, he'll be forgotten for a bit, but resurrected in the 19th century, because when realism comes in with Courbet, Caravaggio will become appreciated in the whole new terms. So his legacy is tremendous. For one thing, as I said before, he kind of managed to express the supernatural in quotidian terms, in realistic terms, and he removed the distance between his subject and us, the viewers. So that's one thing. And then another is that he introduced this uncompromising realism into his paintings, and that will not be accomplished again until the early 19th century with Courbet and his group. So very important. But meanwhile, he had a great number of followers, and one of them, interestingly, was a very talented young woman by the name of Artemisia Gentileschi. Her father was also a painter of note. So Gentileschi and Caravaggio and another painter by the name of Tassi, Tassi, I think. They were all sort of in the same group together, and they were all vagabonding together. And the story is very muddled. The story goes that that Gentileschi apprenticed his daughter, who clearly showed great talent, to Tassi, to this other painter, and who consequently violated the girl. And so the father took him to court, but the court pretty much threw the case out, and Tassi was not punished. At any rate, she was a brilliant painter in her own right, and she picked up on the story of Judith and Holofernes, and she did at least 2 versions of it, and that's what we're looking at right here. This is Artemisia, and the 2 versions, they're both actually in Florence. One comes directly after the other. This is the earlier version, and this is the later version. And in both versions, both women are directly involved. In other words, here is Caravaggio, and here is Artemisia. And in Artemisia's painting, both women are right there, taking their anger on Holofernes in no uncertain terms. If the blood is dripping down the bedclothes, Holofernes is fighting. Here he's not even fighting. He's just screaming.
It's interesting how the later one of her 2 renditions of this is more violent, as if the anger and the resentment just grew inside of her. The second one is more violent. It has
this
more
one, right?
Yeah, it has more blood.
Right.
And that second knife is cutting right into his throat.
Oh my God, yes. Yes, absolutely. So there's a lot more emotion in these paintings than even in Caravaggio. So this whole idea of realism is taken still another step farther.
And a lot more agency. I mean, they're helping each other.
Yes.
They're not just decorative spectators.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also the red here. She doesn't have, does she have the curtains? No, she doesn't have, she doesn't seem to have the curtains. In the second one you see this blood. She also borrowed this, she must have borrowed it from Caravaggio's Decapitation of St. John the Baptist, because this river of red is just flowing over the body of Holofernes, and everything is right in front of us. We are participants in the same deed. It's as if we are the 4th person. She also, this is a story from the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, one of the later books, and it tells about a beautiful young maiden who went to bathe, but her housekeeper or one of her servants unlocked the gate and allowed a couple of elders into the garden to watch, and there they are, and the story goes that they wished, of course, to have sex with her, but she refused, and as a result they besmirched her name. But then, of course, the prophet Daniel took the case and investigated it, and he realized that both of them are telling different stories, both of these men, and therefore she must be innocent. So the power of judgment, and it became another extremely popular theme, because of course it allows a nude portrayal of a nude woman with 2 lecherous men. And if you just look up Susanna and the Elders, you'll see the portrayal from early on into modern times. But this is the way Artemisia portrayed it. Here is the woman. She is the only reason she's nude is not because she undressed for them, but because she was about to go and bathe, and then there are these 2 lecherous men who are essentially assaulting her, wishing to violate her. But what is interesting, and actually Sasha brought my attention to it, is that it seems that the X-ray was made of the painting, and Artemisia's original intention was much more aggressive than what she ended up with. Here she shows a woman who is screaming bloody murder, and in fact has a knife in her hand ready to use it. But then, just as with Caravaggio, I suppose also, this was deemed unacceptable, so she had to tone it down and present this painting.
But it's so interesting because this is just something completely new. I mean, Caravaggio, of course, brought chiaroscuro to the world of painting, but Artemisia Gentileschi just brought agency to the female subjects of her paintings. I mean, they were just as violent, as ill-tempered, as wrathful, as vengeful, and as frightening as the men when they needed to be. And it's interesting, and it just reminds you, this just looks like something straight out of the Bible with which is it? It's Matthew 5:29 when some lecherous men told Jesus, we saw this beautiful woman and it gave us lustful thoughts, and Jesus' response was, "Oh, your eyesight made you sin. Pluck out your eyes."
Right, exactly.
Like, wait, no, she made us sin. No, you saw her. You said so. This is not a case of what was she wearing. This is a case of you just need to pluck out your eyes.
Exactly.
The fault lies with you. Look to your own soul. Mm-hmm. And it just going back to the Medusa thing. Mm. You just made this really interesting thread through these lectures.
No, it's true. She was supposed to be a beautiful maiden, and she was violated by Poseidon in the temple of Athena by god of the sea. And, who got punished? Medusa, of course. Then Athena turned her face into something ugly, and her hair into hissing snakes. Yes?
An alternative version of that myth is that Athena couldn't punish Poseidon because he was a fellow god. So instead she gave Medusa a gift. She took away the beauty that had attracted Poseidon to her so that she would never again become a target, and she gave her power to destroy men.
Right.
Someone as recently as 2008, his name was Luciano Garbati.
No, I never heard of him.
He's really interesting. He did a sculpture.
He's a contemporary.
Contemporary Italian
artist.
sculptor. Okay. And he did, so to parallel that sculpture you showed of
Perseus with the head of Medusa, Cellini, yeah?
Yeah, Cellini's Perseus with the head of Medusa. He did a parallel sculpture to that with Medusa with the head of Perseus.
Huh.
But instead of Medusa holding up the head of Perseus like a trophy and with bravura the way that Perseus holds up her head, she's holding his head down at her hip, not as a trophy, but just because she's tired. Mm. So if someone else invaded her home and she's standing there with a knife and she's just holding this thing down at her hip and she's just tired and she's ready to just probably throw it back off the mountain.
Interesting. It's probably still a theme on this whole Judith Holofernes.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thread that you brought with Medusa and with Judith and Holofernes.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll look at one more today, who was very influenced by Caravaggio, and then in the future lectures we'll see many more, as you can imagine. And his name is Giuseppe de Ribera, who was a Spaniard, but he came to Sicily, and at that time Sicily and Naples, it was called the Kingdom of Two Sicilies and belonged to Spain. And so he worked for the Viceroy of Spain in Naples. He must have gone to Rome, and he was familiar, and of course Caravaggio also came to Naples before, and he was familiar with Caravaggio's style, which influenced him very much because it sort of upheld his native Spanish sense of reality, and he became a very compelling painter in his own right. And here's his interpretation, however, of Bacchus. We remember how Caravaggio painted his Bacchus as a beautiful youth that's offering us to participate in a feast with him. Now Ribera, the diagonals are there. He submerges his painting in darkness, except for just a little bit of light in the corner, and even that light looks more sepia. And what we see against the light is just a beast of burden. Really, we see an ass who is braying, and underneath a lovely boy who participates in this whole camaraderie. Bacchus is here. He is probably is a youngish man, even though he is very overweight, and as a result probably looks late 20s, early 30s.
Is it just overweight, or is he meant to be bloated and ill? I mean, is there? I mean,
He may be bloated. I don't know about ill,
but look at his. I mean, just saying, looking at his knees, and
right.
at just the size of his belly, I'm wondering, and the thinness of the rest of it, I'm wondering if there's meant to be like what you said earlier. When you said there is decay in beauty.
Right.
I'm wondering if the shape of Bacchus here. He's not just a portly large man.
Yeah.
He looks a little.
Possible, because Ribera will do the same thing as Caravaggio. He'll go back to actual models. So this is a real man.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at somebody real. Now, whether his abdomen is, as Sasha says, whether he's ill, the man, or whether he's just overeaten and drunk too much, everything is possible. He is surrounded by his court. And there are satyrs among them. Satyrs satyrs and Maenads. They all followed Bacchus. But usually we see the scenes with Bacchus as very colorful, as very joyful. Here, for instance, here is Titian painted this about 100 years earlier. And here too, in the corner, in the same sort of position, as our Bacchus right there, but lies this lovely female shape, and she may be dreaming this whole thing up, or she's part of the revelry and she just fell asleep. And Titian loved female nudes, and this is one of them. Now our Bacchus, or Silenus, who was his teacher, is lying out there, completely out, while the company of men and women are carousing and having a lovely time, and all of that is done in this spectacular Venetian colors, and everybody's happy, and there's this constant round movement and beautiful understanding, of course, of transparency of light. So that is Titian's understanding of these, and here is this is how Ribera showed it. He also began to paint portraits of very real people, of downtrodden people, and here is an old moneylender. Now we also, just as we talked about the calling of St. Matthew, just as tax collectors were despised, so were the moneylenders, because obviously the moneylenders had money while no one else did, and then of course they charged interest. They may all go to church and profess to be Christians, but everybody charged interest, and frankly the highest interest was charged by the Vatican. So here is Ribera. He shows the old moneylender, and it's just a completely realistic portrait. If I saw this portrait, I may have, I mean, if I didn't know Courbet and what he did, I could have mistaken it for a 19th century realistic portraiture. Everything again is drowned in darkness. There is the tenebrism, the chiaroscuro, right there, the darkness and the whites. All the textures are incredibly well portrayed, and the same thing that he borrows from Caravaggio is that the distance between us disappears. We are sitting at the same table. We are looking at that same at that woman. That woman is clearly unhappy, and she's old, and she is sitting. She's sitting with a scale in her hands, because as she weighs the money, she also has to change the money. She's also a money changer, because at that time, with all the different provinces, and Italy was not united. Italy will not be united until the end of the 19th century. So every duchy, every county had their own mint, and the money. So these people really had to know how to compare. So they had to be intelligent. They had to be able to calculate. They had to know the arithmetic. And here's this old woman, all wrinkled, with this incredibly intelligent face, and also very sharp-witted, and she's looking at these scales right there to see what she must do. And very, very real. Then, of course, when the Spaniards decided to portray martyrdoms, there's something in this, it runs through Spanish blood and German blood. There's attraction to human suffering, and they like to portray it, both the Spaniards and, as I said, and the Germans. And here is one Saint Philip, who obviously was martyred. So he seems to be crucified in some particular way. And here he is, straight in the middle. He is an older man. He seems emaciated, and Ribera portrays it very, very well. But what he shows around him is, while these extremely muscular men lift up the body, just as in Caravaggio, remember the Crucifixion of St Peter. But what he really shows also is all these people around. Look at this one. This one is kind of in this position of let me see better, because well, in those days and until fairly recently, certainly into the 18th century, crucifixions were entertainments. They didn't have television. They didn't have. They couldn't read books. Public executions were something that one looked forward to. One would gather one's family, pack up a picnic, and go see an execution. And the bloodier the execution, the more people it would attract. And that's what Ribera portrays here as well. There, I mean, St. Peter is in the. I mean, St. Peter. St. Philip is in the middle, being tortured. But then around him, there are a great deal of people whose faces do not express anything but curiosity. I mean, if you read the Tale of Two Cities, Dickens, during the French Revolution, 1793, during the time of terror, the guillotine was going up and down constantly, and around the guillotine there was always a crowd. But there were also the people who came all the time. There were these women. They were called the knitters, and they would just sit around and knit and talk to each other and just count those heads, 1, 2, 3, 4, into hundreds and thousands. And that's what Ribera conveys here as well. And yes, and this is absolutely one of the most adorable, one of my most beloved paintings. It is in Paris, and it is of a club-footed boy. And there was so much misery at that time, because of course medicine was essentially non-existent, and when it did exist, it couldn't even save the rich. Goodness, when Lorenzo de' Medici lay dying at the end of the 15th century, his doctors fed him powdered diamonds.
Not the best for digestion.
Not the best for digestion, exactly. So the medicine really did not exist, and people who were unfortunately born with some malfunctions had to live with it. But what I absolutely love about this is that in this case, this little boy, what is he, 7, 8? You think?
He's adorable.
Yeah, and he has this club foot, but he's happy. So his family must love him. So somebody must love him. No one is happy when no one loves him. And I mean, his teeth, of course, are all broken, and there's no such thing as dentistry. And yet he's happy. He places Ribera. He in fact rejects the tenebrism and rejects the chiaroscuro and places this boy above a very, very low horizon. He just becomes a giant, dominating the horizon. And it's as if happiness dominates it despite physical disabilities. And there he is going somewhere and posing at the same time. And he's got a couple of dimples in his cheeks, and he's just incarnation of happiness. And that's just lovely. Well, it's been pleasure, and I will see you next time. Thank you.